I'm Glyn from MrGlyn's Pickups, and in this series I'm talking to makers of musical gear all around New Zealand. Now this time I'm talking to Russ Mattsen in Nelson, and he makes fantastic resonator guitars, metal bodied resonators. I've got a load of questions for him. His website looks awesome. If you'd like to subscribe to this series, and I really like it if you did, could you please do that below? Thank you. Hi Russ, how you doing? Good to see you there in your workshop.
Nice, good to see you too, Glenn.
Yeah, so how did you get into making resonators?
It started through basically through the love of the music. I was traveling to Motueka and visiting a guy there that was teaching me how to play the blues, and he was a guitar maker and repairman, and so yeah, one thing led to another. I started learning a little bit of slide music, and then we sort of run out of songs to learn, so I started asking him about how making instruments. And as I was a engineer, I thought, oh well, I could possibly make one, and had a go at it. Yeah.
Right. So it started with music rather than the tinkering thing.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, I think like I was walking past a record store one day, and I saw a Hound Dog Taylor album sitting in there, and just loved the cover and thought, oh, you know, what's this music about? And that was the first time I'd heard slide guitar, and then just one thing led to another, and then I was lucky that this guy who I was getting guitar lessons off, yeah, that he was building instruments, and so yeah, after learning how to play, then we just led on to how to build an instrument. I built an electric guitar first, and then I restored an old acoustic guitar, and then I thought, well, now it's time to try a resonator guitar, and yeah, the first one it worked. You know, it was over constructed. You know, I didn't know really what thickness materials to use. In fact, I had no plans at all about how to build them. I just knew about scale lengths. I knew they had an aluminium resonator cone inside them, and so I just gave it a go, and luckily it worked out really well. It you know, played in tune. It sounded like okay. It was a heavy beast, but because of that, it had heaps of sustain, and worked really well. And so from building one instrument, then I thought, well, I've done that one. Let's give it a go and see if I can improve. And so I built another couple, and people were interested in them, so I sold those, and just carried on. So I was trying to think how long ago that was. I think it was probably about 98, I think. And so I've been building since then, and now I'm up to I've just completed number 85.
Wow. Interesting, you're talking about the heavy overbuilt or light. I mean, I've got a thing with acoustic guitars, is that if they're not light, they won't fly. You know, I think, and I find that, yeah, hefty ones, sustain. They're like all the string energy is bounced straight back into the string, but the body doesn't seem to join in as much.
Yeah, well, I've been, over the years, you know, when you hand build instruments, that's the beauty of it, that you can, each time you build one, you make small changes, and then you see what sort of difference that does. And so, you know, the first ones I made were thicker material, and then I experimented with a thicker top and a thin back, and then a thick back and a thin top, and and then all the rest of it as well, like going, say, try different scale lengths, trying different depths of the body, seeing what difference that does. Lately, I went deeper and deeper bodies, and until I thought I'd gone to the very limit, and now I've come back and gone really thin to where I thought was the limit, and sort of now I think I've found a happy medium, and but I'm always trying to make my instruments lighter. I think it just makes them more alive, and makes them easier to on your back and neck, and you know, because they are heavy instruments, you know, so the lighter you can make them, the better.
So how much influence in your mind does the back have on the sound?
Well, it certainly made a difference when you start shaping the back. You know, that's when I really noticed it. You know, when you've got a box and you speak into it, you know, you get a bit of reflection. But then as soon as I shaped that back, it sort of gives it that reflective surface, and you could notice it straight away that it was more reflective, just having a little bit of curve in there, and so yeah, it's not so much the thickness. To me, it's just getting a bit of curve in there seems to do the job. And when you're going thinner materials, having a curve in there gives it the strength back again.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what sort of curve? I know like D28 acoustics are made with about a 16-foot radius on the back. Are you thinking about that same curve?
I don't really know how much that would be. To me, I can probably get about 5 mil depth, maybe. Yeah, right. 5 or 6 mil depth over the widest part. Yeah, that's what I sort of aim for. I mean, I like to hammer it out by hand. So I just have a hole basically of the shape that I want, and then I get in there with rubber hammers and I just work it and shape it, and I just love doing that. I mean, I've made up forms and things in the past where you sort of like stamp it out, and it's just, to me, it's just so boring and doesn't have any character. Whereas mine, you know, you can see the hammer marks in it, you know, you can see the working, and that's one thing I'm sort of I try to show my working, you know. I if I can, you know, it makes it more real, makes it more hand done if people can see that how you've made it. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I suppose there are two schools of thought, aren't there? I suppose, yeah, yes. If you make it completely pure looking, then I can see why you'd want that. But also, yeah, it just looks like it was made on a CNC machine or something. I love this idea of using a hammer, because in normal lutherie work you don't use a lot of hammers, and yeah, I can see that. I can see the appeal of that. So it's like you've got like a shaped mold, have you, that you're knocking it into?
Yeah, it's real simple, and it's a nice way to work. You know, it's not loud because I'm using a rubber hammer, and because I don't want to dent it too much. I just want to, you know, put a nice even sort of hammer marks in it all the way around, and yeah, it's just something I sort of worked out how to do. I mean, I've like I say, I've done forms and I've made it look perfect, but to me it looked like it was a stamped out oven tray, you know. It just looked, you know, I mean, what's the point, you know?
Yeah,
it's supposed to be a handmade instrument, so yeah, let's get it made by hand, and that's the way I like to work. I cut out all my materials by hand, especially the metal on that. I do it by hand with nibblers, and it's such a nice way to work, because I've worked in engineering workshops, and you know, they're noisy places, and I don't want to have noisy machinery. I want to have it as quiet as I can. And when you're just, you know, slowly nibbling away, as long as you're not doing a production run, you can get away with working with hand tools. And the beauty of doing that is that you can work right up to your line. I can cut right up to my line all the way around the metal, and that it's pretty much done. Whereas if you're sort of using machine tool, you have to stay off your line and then clean up, you know, to your line and clean it up. A lot more working that way. So yeah, that's just one of the ways I like to work. Yeah.
But that's experience too, isn't it? Because when you start off, you're over cautious and you go, oh, I've got to give that at least 10 mil, probably more, and then you spend so much time mucking about afterwards. But yeah, with experience, you just get it right. Do you find you have good days and bad days?
Monday's always the toughest day because you had a big weekend. Yes, but even the bad days is when you learn the most. You know, when you don't learn anything when you get it right, and that's what I've learned over the years. That, you know, you only learn something when you get it wrong, because you can do the same operation over and over again. You think you know it, but until you stuff it up, that's when you actually learn how to do it properly. And you know, it's like soldering the sides onto the top. You know, it was always a battle, you know, trying to get the material where I wanted it and solder it. And it wasn't till, you know, you have a few mistakes and like the first time I soldered the sides onto a top, I had to get another person to help me, you know, because I was fighting it too much. And then over the years, you know, I refined it, and it becomes a nice, easy job. So yeah, it's just the processes you have to go through. Yeah.
How do you do that? I mean, is that in a mold, or how do you hold that?
I just the way I build is I start with the top, cut that out, do all my shaping that I want to do on that, like on the F holes, and I create the well that the cone sits in. Then I just wrap the sides around and solder it as I go, because the sides are fairly thin. Sometimes I'll pre-bend them where the waist is, or like on this one, it's you know, it's got the scroll all that. I have to pre-bend that, but you know, I still have to like get it to match, and I just sort of do it by eye. I just match it up and then get the soldering iron in there and solder it together. Yeah, I don't have to worry about molds. There's the only things I sort of have to make for each model is the form for making the back, which is a hole. Basically, I have to make a hole to hammer it into. And that's about it. That's the only sort of forms I have to make for each guitar, and that's what I think is one of my strengths, is that each guitar can be different. You know, I'm not, you know, when you go to all that effort of making molds, it makes you think, well, I have to keep making the same thing, you know, whereas I don't. I can make pretty much whatever anybody wants. Yeah, so that's one of my sort of advantages as I see it.
Yeah, I'd never thought of it that way. Yeah, that's really interesting. And so the metal that you use, obviously, different metal has different densities and therefore different sounds. Do you have preferences, or it just depends on what sound?
Definitely, I like you know, brass is my favorite, and it's really nice to work with. But I also make them out of copper, and of course copper's softer, so it's got a softer sound, a softer tone. And normally the copper would be for clients who find that resonator guitars are too bright. a lot of people find them very bright. So if they're that way inclined but still want a resonator guitar, I'll make it out of copper, and that would just mellow it down a little bit and make a softer sound. And then you've got steel, and steel's the hardest and the brightest. And I don't really like using steel. It's not the nicest material to work and use. You get all real dirty but it still has its place. You know, there's times that I will make steel resonators if someone really wants one, and then I patina them up and turn them into like rust buckets and stuff. You know, so yeah, but brass is the top of the line for me. Yeah.
And thin sheets of brass are readily available?
Yes, yeah, they are. Yeah. Materials can get a bit tricky at times, because the importers here in New Zealand are, they seem to be importing less variety of materials. But I mean, what I'm using is just your standard sort of brass. I like to use like half hard brass, so it's already got a bit of tension in it, and then if I need to work it, I can anneal it and soften it. But yeah, I'm finding that I'm going to have to get some more material, import it from Australia, which is okay, because I mean, I import timber I get that through Stuart Mac, and so yeah, there's a little bit of importing of materials involved, but it's relatively easy. Probably the hardest material to get is the material for making the cone, because that's around about 10 thou thick aluminium, and that's a lot harder to get. Yeah.
You make the cone?
I make my own cones. Yeah.
You make a cone?
Yeah, well, it's why not? Because if I buy cones, then my instruments are going to end up sounding like another National, and I don't see the point of having another National guitar. So I spin my own cones and create my own sound, which is still pretty similar, but I just try and the way I shape my cone, I try to give it a little bit more movement so I can accentuate the bass tones a bit more, because they're bright enough. They don't need to be any brighter. So I just try and get a bit more of the bassy sort of sounds coming out. Yeah. And so to make the cone, you make a form, a wooden form, and then hold that in a lathe and spin it, attach your aluminium sheet to that, and then you just use I use like a steel rounded point, and you just, as the aluminium's spinning, you're pushing it against this wooden form, and it's real hands-on. If you push too hard, you're going to go through it. If you don't push hard enough, it's not going to follow the form, and you're stretching the material into shape as it's spinning in the lathe. And it's a fantastic process. Spinning is like a lost art. People used to spin to make pots and vases and all sorts. That was a job, being a spinner, but it's lost these days. But and so I make my own cones. I can make whatever size I want. So I've made, 6-inch cones as a standard size for tricones. I don't know if you're familiar with tricones, but they're resonators with 3 cones. And then I like the National style, and the style I like is a 9.5 inches diameter. Dobros, they're 10.5, so they're a little bit bigger, and they work another way. They have a spider and they're up the other way. And so I thought that, right, I'm going to make the biggest resonator cone in the world. So I made an 11-inch, spun up an 11-inch cone. So as far as I know, it's, you know, it's probably the biggest cone, but, you know, there might be other people out there making them bigger on a one-off sort of thing. But yeah, and so I've done that. I mean, having an 11-inch, you know, cone, it's like having an 11-inch speaker. You know, you get way more volume, and I mean, it really moves some air. And I put that in what I call a jumbo body, but it's not really a jumbo compared to an acoustic guitar. It's more of a just a little bit bigger than your standard resonator. And yeah, I think I've made 3 of those, and they sold pretty quickly. People were into them. They like the idea. I mean, I like the idea of maybe one day, you know, making a bass resonator and all sorts. But I think the next thing I'll do is try and make the world's smallest resonator cone, because you know, for something like I mean, I make the odd ukulele, and your standard resonator ukulele uses a 6-inch cone, and they don't tend to go much smaller than tenors. Sometimes you get the odd concert size uke, but I want to make a soprano and maybe have like a 4-inch cone, you know,
like a little bottle top or something, or a cone.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, why not? You know.
Yeah. So when you got the 11-inch cone, is that okay at dealing with the pressure from the strings? Because surely that would be more flimsy, wouldn't it?
No, because if you imagine a cone like that shape, it's pretty strong shape, right. And so what you end up doing, each of the cones have a little bit of a flat out towards the edge, and that helps the whole thing flex and move the air. So it's all a matter of how much flat area you have. You know, you have to work that out. If it's too big a flat area, it might collapse, or if it's too small an area, it might not move enough to create the sound. So that's where the variation comes in and cones. Yeah. And I tend to make mine a little bit thicker, because I find, to me, most resonators are, you know, made by other people, are too nasally. I try and get a bit more directness with mine. Yeah. So that's just a difference between my cones and someone else's. Yeah.
I used to find when setting up resonators that string break angle over the bridge was the most important thing. You know, it seemed to be too much break angle, too much downforce, and you stifle the cone. And then too little and things just bouncing around, it's all rattly. But there's that optimum point where it'll and there's a massive difference in volume.
Yes, yeah, that's so true. Yeah, I used to experiment with all sorts of like little adjusters on my tailpiece, you know, and be raising and it had little screw adjustments so you could raise and lower it, and but after a while, you know, you work out how much sort of break angle you need, and yeah, it's so important getting that angle right. Yeah, and that's why so many resonator guitars buzz, you know, because, you know, that angle was wrong. You know, a lot of them don't have enough neck angle, or, you know, so yeah, there's a bit to setting them up, and that's why I like the way I build. I like to have more of a bolt-on neck, so I can change the angle and get it set up just how you want, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if you're making it for a specific customer, then you can find out what they want. But the hardest customers are always, I play some slide and some of my fingers. And you're like, you always got to work with them, because how much pressure do you apply with a slide? Well, no one can actually answer that question. So yeah, that's always the really hard one. And I suppose, yeah, the bolt-on neck will give you a huge luxury there of being able to change stuff, and you can choose that break angle.
Yes, yeah, it is. And with most of my guitars lately too, I sort of offer. I used to offer 2 saddles, and so I have interchangeable saddles. But these days I just have a little bit of shim that you can lift up the saddle and slide a bit of shim under there and change the angle that way as well, sort of depending on which model of guitar it is. But yeah, just little things like that, you know, is what I do that's different than other people. And also I can, the saddle was sitting in a holder, and so I can alter and set up the intonation right so the guitar will play in tune as you go up the neck. Just simple things like that. Because yeah, I mean, I like to play finger style as well as slide, so I don't want to, you know, huge action all the time. So yeah, I just try and make my guitars so easily to be able to set up by people, and you know, yeah, double action. I use double action truss rods and things just to help all that sort of stuff. Yeah, it seems to work.
Yeah. So tell me, Biscuit or Spire?
Biscuit is for me. You know, if you're a country person who really loves the country music, then a Spider is the way to go. If you love that sound. But I'm a blues player. Most of my clients are blues players, so they want the national sound, which is a Biscuit bridge. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
That's so the body shapes. I mean, I love that scroll. That is really cool. And you do some with Cutaways. What difference is there much difference in the sound with the Cutaway?
Yeah, I think there is. I mean, it's always hard, but you know, unless you got two guitars side by side and really make that comparison. And I very rarely have, you know, two of the exact same models sitting side by side. But you know, with a Cutaway, you're taking away some of the box basically, and so it's not going to be as boomy. You know, it's going to probably be a bit more mids, you know, or a bit more trebly sort of, you know, but these are only very slight differences. But you know, most people want to Cutaway because they want access. They're not worried about the sound. You know, they want to be able to get up to those upper frets. Yeah. So yeah, I think most people, you know, they judge instruments on how they look for a start. You've probably come across that yourself. And then that's the first thing they look at, you know, and then they listen to the sound, you know. That's how it works. Yeah.
I think if we were all honest, yeah, everyone does that. I think that's because that's your first. It's the first experience you have with a guitar is you see it. You know, before you play it or hear it or anything. Then and so yeah, that's got to be right. And yeah, you got the photos on your website. You got some great photos.
Yeah. It's a lot of work, you know. I used to spend, you know, day, you know, especially when you were back in the old day of having film, you know, that was so hard. You know, you'd take your shots, and I used to chrome plate them, or I used to nickel plate my resonators. And you try and take a photo of a nickeled instrument, which is like photographing a mirror.
Yeah.
Everything is reflected in there. So, and then people will go, oh, has that got a bit of color on that body, or has it got, you know, a red? And it'll just be like a tree or whatever that's in the background that's reflecting on it. But yeah, thankfully these days people don't want, from me anyway, they don't want nickeled or chromed instruments. They want more antiqued looking instruments. That seems to be the go. Yeah.
So who are your customers then?
These days they tend to either be Kiwis or Americans.
Okay. Yeah, I saw on your site that when you're building someone a guitar, you give them regular photo updates. That's a cool thing to do.
Yeah, it is. They, and it all helps with the buy-in of, you know, it's their instrument, you know, they're seeing it's created, and it's it is a good feeling for them, you know, and they get excited. I mean, the last one I just sent to Chicago, and you know, it was over the sort of lockdown thing that's happening over there, and it was just taking ages. Trying to get it through customs can be a bit tricky too, you know. There's all these new timber laws and stuff that you know, even though I write down, you know, what the timbers are, I've learnt now to have a really full description, and you know, what sort of timber it is, and all the information they need, you know, like they need the weight of the timber and how much you're using, of course. But instead of looking at the description, they'll just go to the client and then put all this hassle on the client. But anyway, we got through that, and he ended up, like, it was supposed to be delivered to the door, and it would have been, but he drove 400 miles in the pouring rain to pick up his guitar from the depot, and he was so proud, you know. You know, when you get that initial feedback from the client and how happy they are, it's you know, some of them are just say the most amazing things. It's, you know, it really makes it all worthwhile, you know, because they're such a long way away, and you're not, you know, you don't get that really physical contact of meeting someone. It's pretty important, you know, to build a relationship. Yeah.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's, with customers, that is very, very important, because it's not, you're not a retailer, you know. It's not, you don't buy something from somewhere and sell it somewhere else, and it's a different thing, and really, that bloke in Chicago, he's probably going to have that guitar the rest of his life. And
yeah, it's amazing, because, you know, I mean, he told me he's owned or still owns about 6 Resonator guitars, and you know, now mine is his favorite, and he's over the moon, and wants to show it off to all his mates, but of course he can't, he's in lockdown, so yeah, it's a funny world. Like, you know, I never dreamed that I would sell more than one instrument to the same person, but I've done that multi times. I've sold 2 instruments to one person, and I've even sold 3 instruments to one person. So it's amazing what can happen, you know.
Yeah. Well, that, I mean, doesn't that say so much about the quality of your guitars? I mean, if people come back for more, that's great. Hey, so tell me about the one you got on your lap. It looks like a gigging guitar looks like a set list stuck to the side of it.
Yeah. So this is my instrument. So even though I've built 85 guitars, you know, I've only ever built 2 for myself. So about every 10 years I build myself another instrument. But this is my favorite at the moment. It's gone through a lot of configurations, especially with the pickups. I used to experiment quite a bit with pickups, and you know, I ended up putting this pickup ring on here because it's pretty ugly underneath there. I've cut heaps of holes and done all sorts of things, and so that's the latest configuration. The cover plates, you know, I'll sometimes just make a new cover plate and change the design. Sometimes I'll have copper instead of brass. And I like to run 2 jacks, and I'll have like a magnetic pickup running one jack, and then I'll run a piezo to another jack. Just so much simpler. Man, I've gone through all sorts of configurations when it comes to pickups, you know. I've had like knobs all over the place, so now I try not to do any of that. I try and keep them as simple as possible. Just means less things to break down. Even just like doing simple things like putting a jack plate on, you know, because, you know, as you know, the jack plug requires the most maintenance out of, you know, all the electrical parts.
Yeah.
And so just to have a simple thing like a jack plate makes it all so much easier for working on your guitar. So so I like to do stuff like that. But yeah, this is my main instrument.
So what are the pickups in there?
And this one and the piezo,
Yeah.
I tend to use Fishman pickups. Yeah, I've experimented. They do a few different ones for resonator guitars. Yeah, they have the Nashville, which is for the Dobros, is a very good pickup, and I use that on mine. But I have to modify the pickup quite heavily to get it to work because it's a split pickup. And I have to turn it into a solid thing and get it to work on my guitars. Takes a lot of bit of work, but otherwise they have little donut pickups that you can attach to the bottom of the cone, and they all work, but they're pretty screechy, some of them.
Yeah.
Definitely need a bit of EQing and I've used a lot of gold foils and as magnetic pickups before, and they're pretty popular. Yeah. And I've also used de-almonds. I actually quite like the de-almond Rhythm Kings and stuff like that, just because I love the way they mount on the guitar, on the stick,
Yeah. Right.
It's a cool thing to do, rather than either cutting holes in the top. I try and avoid that. It just depends on what the client wants, of course,
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great. Pick up, mucking around with them. Yeah, you know what it's like, eh?
Well, I do all day now. But yeah, sure. So what's the headstock look like on that one? Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's a slotted headstock. It's a maple neck. It's quite a beautiful piece of timber, actually. It's a bit of curved maple, ebony fingerboard and stuff. On this one here, I've inlaid mother of pearl into the headstock, but I don't tend to do that anymore for a couple of reasons. I inlay brass and metal in there, and it's so much easier because you try and you're trying to cut out shell, and you'll get, especially when you're doing a script, you'll get 3/4 of the way around and then it'll break, and then you have to start again. It's quite common, and but if you're cutting it out of metal, you might bend it, but you can soon straighten it, but it won't break, So and plus also, there's certain bans on certain types of shell these days, so I just find it easier not to use shell. Machine heads, of course, they're really important on resonator guitars, because you've got the heavy strings. There's a lot of tension on there, and if you've got crappy tuners, the strings will just wreck them after a few years. So these ones are shallow, beautiful machine heads. I couldn't actually get I couldn't get the post for steel strings in this style that with ebony knobs. So I ended up, in the early days, I was buying like 2 sets of tuners and then pulling them all to bits and then putting them back together so I could get like steel string tuners, rather than I was making them up out of steel string and classical machine heads and combining them too. And so it was costing me a fortune in machine heads, but it was really worth it because the Germans make really good stuff, and so, but these days I'm use Waverleys on my guitars, and they're beautifully made.
Some of those classical ones, you can just pull the sleeve off on the barrel part, and it's okay underneath. They don't all come off. Sometimes it's a bit messy, but yeah. So how do people get in touch with you? Let's say I wanted you to make me 4 guitars. How do people find you?
Normally, most people are just on the internet. They're just they're you know, they're just Googling and resonator guitars, and then I'll come up, and then they'll click through to my website, and then they'll just check out my work, see what I do, and then they end up either picking a model that they like, or they'll combine different aspects of different models, and I'll say either yay or nay whether I'll build it or not, depending on how wild an idea it is. And because I believe I can build anything, you know, but whether I want to or not, that's a different story. But you know, I don't like, you know, them being too crazy an idea, too themed or something. You know, they have to, you know, have to be within reason. But yeah, that's how they normally find me. Google. The last guy found me through YouTube. That was the first time. I mean, for years I've been putting up videos. I used to make slideshows actually, and put them up on YouTube. And quite a few people find me through that. But this last time was the first time I've actually sold an instrument, basically through someone finding me through YouTube. Yeah. So it did pay off, all those years of putting up all those YouTube videos.
It stays there, doesn't it? You know, you put something on Facebook and it's just gone in 24, 48 hours, whereas at least YouTube things do stay. Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for this for the insight, Russ. It's been really cool.
Excellent.
It's just it's such a different world making guitars out of metal. I love it. That's brilliant.
Just before you go, I'll just show you a little gadget that I came up with.
Sure.
I call it the Mattsen fret riser, and I'm the only person who makes them. Sort of, it's designed for slide guitar players, and so when you're playing slide, you've got to have a bit of action, of course, so you can so you're not hitting the frets. So so I come up with this idea. So if you want to change key when you're playing slide, say I'm in open G, right, and I might want to play in the key of A. Well, I've either got the option of tuning or using a capo. Well, as soon as you put the capo on, you've lowered all your action, and then you start knocking onto the frets. So I've come up with this idea of this. It's called the fret riser, and it's basically a piece of brass, and it's shaped to match the fingerboard, and it sits over the fret, half the fret, and so it maintains the. I'll just do that again so you can see it. You just slide it under here, under the strings, pop the capo on, and then you're away, and then you've reintroduced your action back into. Yeah, it's a real simple idea, and it's amazing how many of the people go, "Oh, I wish I thought of that. It was so simple," but it's just yeah. And so I came up with that idea, and there's a page on my website where people can buy them, and yeah, I've just been selling those on the side.
So that capo isn't bending the string sharp as well, like they normally bend. You know, normally you put a capo on and you're going, "Oh, I'm retuning anyway." But yeah, that is really cool. I'm going to be another person to say I wish I'd thought of that as well. That's really cool.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, thanks for all your support, Glenn, and appreciate it. You know, the work you're doing here, of introducing different, you know, Kiwi New Zealanders, you know, what they're doing, and showing it off to the world and other people. Thanks a lot.
We had that chat, was it about 6 months ago? And it's like, yeah, then I was trying to think of something some idea to promote everyone, and myself included. And yeah, this seems to be a pretty good idea, I think. So yeah.